Rejected bride sold for cheap. Then a kind cowboy vowed to make her the richest woman in town. The morning Clara was meant to become a bride began like any other, quiet, pale, and full of waiting. The sky was soft with early light, and the town still smelled of dust and cold iron. She sat on the edge of a narrow bed in a borrowed room, her hands folded in her lap, trying to keep them from shaking. The dress she wore was not new. It had been passed down from another woman, then altered again and again until it fit no one perfectly. Still, Clara had washed it carefully and pressed it with her own hands. She told herself that effort mattered, even when money did not exist. She had grown up learning that hope was something to be managed, not trusted. Life in the town had taught her that early. Her parents had died when she was young, leaving her in the care of relatives who never quite decided what to do with her. She worked where she could, cleaning floors, cooking meals, mending clothes, anything that would earn her a place to sleep and a reason to stay. She did not complain. Complaints only made people notice you in the wrong way. Marriage, she had been told, was her chance at stability. Not love, no one promised that, but safety. A home. A name that meant she belonged somewhere. When the arrangement was made, Clara allowed herself a small, careful hope. The man was not cruel, they said. He owned land. He needed a wife. That was enough to build a life on, or so she believed. As the sun climbed higher, the town began to stir. People gathered near the meeting hall where the agreement would be made official. This was not a celebration with music and laughter. It was more like business. A few chairs, a table, witnesses who came out of habit more than care. Clara walked there alone. No one offered to walk beside her. She told herself that independence was strength, even when it felt like loneliness. When she arrived, she saw the groom standing with two older men. He did not look at her at first. He spoke quietly, his voice low and firm. Clara waited, her heart beating too fast. She stood straight, reminding herself to breathe. She had survived worse moments than this. She could survive another. Finally, the man turned to look at her. His eyes moved over her slowly, not unkindly, but without warmth. He asked questions that felt more like inspections. How much could she work? What could she bring with her? Did she have savings, family support? Each answer made his expression tighten. Clara told the truth. She always did. She said she had no dowry, no land, no inheritance, only strong hands, a willingness to work, and a quiet nature. She said she learned quickly and did not waste what she was given. There was a pause after she finished speaking. The men exchanged looks. The groom cleared his throat. He said it plainly, without anger or shame. She was not what he needed. He could not take on someone who brought so little. It would not be practical. It would not be wise. The words fell heavy in the still air. For a moment, Clara felt as if the ground beneath her had shifted. She had expected fear, but not the sharp heat of humiliation. People were watching now. She could feel their eyes, their curiosity, their judgment. Someone laughed quietly. Someone else whispered. Clara kept her face calm, though her chest felt tight. She nodded once, as if this were simply another task that had not worked out. She did not beg. She did not argue. She had learned long ago that doing so only made things worse. The agreement was ended just like that. No ceremony, no apology. The groom turned away, already discussing other options with the men beside him. Clara stood alone, unsure where to go next. In that town, a woman without family or marriage was a problem. People spoke of her as if she were an object left behind, something to be dealt with. She heard her name mentioned later that day, spoken with frustration. Who would take responsibility for her now? Who would feed her? Where would she stay? By evening, decisions were made without her being asked. Debts were discussed, old ones, small ones, but enough to matter to the men who kept records and counted coins. Clara was spoken of as a way to settle those debts, not with cruelty but with cold logic. She sat in the corner of a dim room while they talked. No one looked at her directly. They talked around her, over her, as if she were not there. She stared at her hands again, noticing how rough they were, how used to work. She wondered when her life had become something others could trade. That night she did not cry. Tears required privacy, and privacy was a luxury she no longer had. Instead, she lay awake, listening to the sounds of the town settling into sleep. She thought of the future she had imagined, small, simple, but hers. She let that picture fade, one detail at a time. By morning, the town had already moved on. To them, the rejected bride was old news. To Clara, it was the moment everything changed. She stood at the edge of the street as wagons passed by, dust rising around her boots. She did not know yet where she would go or what would happen next. All she knew was that she was still standing. And for now, that would have to be enough. The decision about Clara's future was made quietly, without drama, the way uncomfortable choices often are. By midday, she was told to gather her few belongings. There was no explanation at first, only short instructions spoken in firm voices. She did as she was told, folding her worn clothes into a small cloth bundle. Every item she owned fit easily inside it. That fact alone said more than words ever could. She was taken to a storage house near the edge of town, a place usually used for grain and tools. The smell of dry wood and old dust filled the air. Clara stood near the wall, her back straight, her face calm. Inside, however, her thoughts were racing. She had learned that fear only made people careless, and carelessness invited harm. So she stayed quiet, listening. Men came and went, speaking in low voices. Coins were counted. Names were mentioned. Clara understood enough to realize what was happening. She was being discussed like livestock or supplies, something to be passed along to settle obligations. No one used harsh language. That almost made it worse. Their calm made it clear that this was normal to them. A few people glanced at her with mild curiosity. One woman looked at her with pity, then quickly looked away. Clara did not blame her. Pity did not change anything. Late in the afternoon, a stranger arrived in town. He came on horseback, dust clinging to his boots and coat. His horse looked tired but well cared for. The man himself appeared the same, worn by work, not neglect. He was a cowboy passing through, someone who moved from place to place doing honest labor where it was needed. His name was Elijah. He came to town looking for supplies and perhaps a short job before moving on. He did not plan to stay long. While speaking with a trader, he overheard fragments of a conversation, mentions of a woman, a debt, an arrangement. He did not interrupt at first. He listened. When he finally asked what they were talking about, the explanation was given plainly. A woman without family, no home, no future in the town. They needed to settle matters cleanly. Elijah frowned, not in anger but in confusion. He asked to see her. Clara was brought forward. She met his eyes without flinching. She had learned that people often mistook quiet for weakness. She did not correct them. It was easier that way. Elijah noticed things others had missed. The way she stood, steady despite everything. The way she listened carefully before responding. He asked her name. She answered clearly. He asked if she understood what was being discussed. She nodded. She said she did. He asked her if she wanted this arrangement. The room went silent. No one had thought to ask her that. Clara paused. She chose her words carefully. She said she wanted a chance to live with dignity. She said she was willing to work. She said she did not expect kindness, but she would not accept cruelty. Elijah looked at the others, then back at her. He said he needed time to think. When he returned later, the agreement was simple. He would take responsibility for Clara. In return, a small debt would be settled. The amount was so low that it embarrassed some of the men present, though none spoke of it. Clara noticed. She stored the feeling away, not bitterness, but clarity. As they prepared to leave town together, whispers followed them. People assumed the worst. They always did. Clara kept her gaze forward. She had learned not to carry other people's shame. The road out of town was long and uneven. Elijah walked beside his horse at first, leading it slowly so Clara could keep pace. He did not rush her. He did not question her silence. That alone felt strange to her. As the sun dipped lower, he offered her water and food. She thanked him. The words felt unfamiliar in her mouth, heavier than they should have. They stopped for the night near a shallow stream. Elijah made a small fire and set up a simple camp. He handed her a blanket and showed her where she could rest, giving her space without making it feel like distance. Clara sat by the fire, staring into the flames. She expected fear to return once the town was behind them. Instead, she felt something else, uncertainty mixed with a cautious sense of possibility. That frightened her more than fear ever had. Elijah spoke after a while, his voice low and calm. He told her she was not owned. He said she could leave whenever she wished. He said he would not force her into anything. He explained that he worked cattle and land, moving when work ended. It was not an easy life, but it was honest. Clara listened. She asked questions not about comfort but about expectations. What work would she do? What would he expect of her? Elijah answered plainly. Work was shared. Respect was not optional. That night Clara slept lightly, waking at every sound. But when morning came, she realized something important. She had slept at all. That had not happened in a long time. Days passed as they traveled. The land stretched wide and open, changing slowly with the sky. Clara helped where she could, cooking, mending, keeping track of supplies. Elijah noticed her attention to detail. He did not praise her loudly, but he trusted her with responsibility. Trust, she discovered, was more powerful than praise. They spoke more as time went on, not of the past but of practical things, roots, weather, work ahead. Yet sometimes in the quiet moments Elijah would ask about her thoughts. At first Clara answered carefully. Then slowly she allowed herself to speak more freely. She told him about growing up without certainty, about learning to read people before speaking, about knowing when to disappear into the background. Elijah listened without interruption. He did not try to fix her story. He simply accepted it. One evening, as they rested near a field where Elijah planned to work for a while, he told her something that stayed with her. He said that being valued was not about what you brought with you, but about what you built over time. He said most people never learned that. Clara thought of the town she had left behind, of the rejection, of the way her worth had been measured and found lacking. She did not speak, but something inside her shifted. For the first time she wondered, not what she could endure, but what she might become. The journey that began with being sold for almost nothing did not feel like an ending anymore. It felt like a rough beginning, uncertain and fragile but real. Clara did not yet know where the road would lead. She only knew that she was no longer standing still, waiting for others to decide her fate. And that knowledge gave her a quiet strength she had never felt before. The days after they settled near the open fields passed slowly, but not heavily. Clara woke each morning before the sun, not because she was told to, but because her body was used to readiness. The land around them was wide and quiet, broken only by the sound of animals and wind moving through grass. There was work to be done, and work gave shape to time. Elijah had found temporary work caring for cattle owned by a distant landholder. It was not glamorous, but it was steady. Clara watched how he handled responsibility. He did not rush, did not cut corners. He treated the animals with care, not softness, but respect. She noticed that he spoke little, yet when he did, people listened. That kind of presence could not be taught. At first, Clara kept herself busy with simple tasks. She cooked meals, cleaned tools, repaired torn cloth, and kept track of supplies. She did these things quietly, efficiently. Elijah never questioned her choices. If something was done well, he nodded. If it needed correction, he explained calmly. There was no sharpness in his voice, no sense of control. That alone made Clara more confident in her actions. One afternoon, while Elijah was away checking a distant fence, Clara noticed a problem with the stored grain. Moisture had begun to ruin part of it. She did not panic. Instead, she separated what could be saved, dried what was damp, and adjusted the storage to prevent it from happening again. When Elijah returned, she explained what she had done and why. He listened carefully, then smiled slightly. It was the first time she had seen that expression on his face. He told her she had likely saved them from losing days of work. That moment stayed with her. Not because of the praise, but because her thinking had mattered. As weeks passed, Elijah began to include Clara in decisions: where to move next, which job to accept, how much risk was worth taking. At first, she hesitated to give opinions. She was used to being told, not asked. But Elijah waited. He did not rush her answers. Slowly, she began to speak. She surprised herself with how much she understood. Years of watching others, of listening instead of talking, had sharpened her judgment. She could read people well. She could sense when an offer sounded fair and when it hid trouble. Elijah noticed this too. One evening, after a long day, they sat near the fire. The sky was deep blue, scattered with stars. The air was cool. Elijah was quiet for a long time, staring into the flames. Clara sensed he was thinking about something important. Finally, he spoke. He told her he had spent years moving from place to place, working hard but never settling. He said he had saved some money, not much, but enough to think about doing more than surviving. He wanted to build something lasting. Land, a business. A future that did not depend on luck alone. Then he said something that surprised her. He said he could not do it alone. He said he trusted her judgment. He asked if she would be willing to build something with him, not as a burden, not as a favor, but as a partner. Clara felt the weight of his words. Partnership was not a word often offered to her. She asked what he meant. Elijah explained plainly. Decisions would be shared. Work would be shared. Profits would be shared. He said he did not promise ease, but he promised fairness. She did not answer right away. That night she lay awake thinking about the town she left, about the way people had decided her value without asking her anything, about how different this felt. By morning she knew her answer. She agreed. From that moment, things changed, not suddenly but steadily. They began keeping proper records of income and expenses. Clara handled the numbers carefully, writing them down each night. She noticed patterns: when prices rose, when demand shifted, which routes were better for trade. Elijah trusted her findings. They took small risks at first, buying a few extra animals when prices were low, taking jobs others avoided because they required patience rather than speed. Slowly, their efforts began to show results. They earned a little more each season, not enough to boast about, but enough to reinvest. Clara learned quickly. Elijah taught her about land, animals, and negotiation. In return, she taught him organization, planning, and how to see beyond the next task. They balanced each other in a way neither had expected. People began to notice. Other workers asked Clara questions. Traders spoke to her directly. At first, this made her uncomfortable. She was used to staying invisible, but she reminded herself that being seen did not have to mean being judged. It could also mean being respected. One afternoon, a man tried to take advantage of them in a deal, assuming Clara would not notice the numbers did not add up. She caught the mistake immediately and pointed it out calmly. The man laughed at first, then stopped when he realized she was right. He corrected the deal without argument. After that, word spread that she was not someone to underestimate. That night, Elijah told her he was proud of her. The word felt strange, almost heavy. She accepted it quietly. As months turned into a year, their work grew more ambitious. They acquired a small piece of land, not rich but workable. It was not a grand purchase, but it was theirs. Clara stood on it one evening, looking across the field, imagining what it could become. She felt something she had never allowed herself to feel before: ownership of her future. There were setbacks, of course, a dry season, a deal that did not go as planned, a stretch of days when nothing seemed to move forward. In those moments, Clara felt old fears return, but Elijah remained steady. He reminded her that progress was not a straight path. He never blamed her. They adjusted and moved on. One evening, after a particularly hard week, Clara confessed something she had never said out loud. She told him that being rejected had made her believe she was replaceable, easy to discard. She said that belief had followed her everywhere. Elijah listened, then spoke carefully. He said worth was not decided by a single moment or a single town. He said people often rejected what they did not understand or could not control. He told her that what they were building together proved more than any argument ever could. That night, Clara realized something important. Elijah's vow was not loud or dramatic. It was made through action, through trust, through consistency. He was not trying to rescue her. He was walking beside her. She began to see herself differently, not as someone who survived by staying quiet, but as someone who could shape outcomes. She spoke with more confidence. She made plans further into the future. She allowed herself to imagine success, not as revenge, but as stability. The promise Elijah had made was never spoken again, yet it lived in every decision they made together. Each careful investment, each fair deal, each long day of work. Clara understood now that becoming rich did not begin with money. It began with being believed in, and for the first time in her life she believed in herself too. The land they owned did not look impressive to anyone else. The soil was uneven, the fence old, and the nearby road was rarely used. But to Clara, it felt like a beginning she could touch. Every morning she walked the edges of the field, noticing where water collected after rain, where grass grew stronger, where the ground stayed firm. She was not guessing anymore. She was observing with purpose. Elijah worked from sunrise to sunset, repairing fences, tending animals, and improving the shelter. His hands were always busy, but his mind was always thinking ahead. Clara matched his effort in her own way. She kept records of every cost and every earning. She learned which supplies lasted longer and which ones failed quickly. Waste bothered her more than exhaustion. They did not rush to expand. That was a decision Clara insisted on. She had seen too many people fail because they wanted growth before stability. Elijah trusted her judgment. Instead of buying more land right away, they focused on improving what they already had. They rotated animals carefully so the ground could recover. They stored feed properly. They planned for seasons instead of reacting to them. Slowly, the land began to change. Grass grew thicker. Animals stayed healthier. Their work started to show results others could see. Traders passing by began to notice the condition of their cattle. Some stopped to ask questions. Clara answered politely but carefully. She had learned the value of information. One trader offered them a deal that sounded generous but required quick expansion. Elijah considered it. Clara asked questions. She ran the numbers that night and showed him the risk. If even one season failed, they would lose everything. Elijah listened. They declined the offer. That decision saved them months later when weather turned harsh and prices shifted suddenly. Others who had taken similar deals struggled. Clara and Elijah tightened their plans and stayed steady. It was not an exciting victory, but it was a real one. As their reputation grew, more opportunities appeared. Clara suggested offering temporary storage for nearby workers who lacked space. It cost little to set up and brought steady income. She suggested trading services instead of only money, repairs in exchange for supplies, help in exchange for future credit. Elijah supported these ideas, even when they were unfamiliar. People began to rely on them not just for work but for fairness. Clara became known for clear agreements. She wrote everything down, explained terms patiently, and never changed conditions halfway. At first, some tried to test her. They failed. She did not argue or raise her voice. She simply stood by the agreement. Elijah noticed how people treated her now. They listened when she spoke. They waited for her approval. This did not change how he saw her, but it changed how the world did. Clara noticed too. She did not let it make her proud. She let it make her careful. With steady income, they reinvested again. This time, they bought better equipment. Then a second small plot of land. Each purchase was planned, measured, and earned. There were no sudden leaps, only steps placed firmly one after another. Clara took on more responsibility. She traveled to nearby towns to negotiate trades. At first, Elijah went with her. Later, she went alone. She felt nervous the first time, but she did not show it. She prepared thoroughly. She studied prices before speaking. She watched how people behaved before trusting their words. Some people underestimated her. That worked in her favor. She used their assumptions to negotiate better outcomes. She never lied. She simply allowed others to reveal their intentions first. At night, Clara often sat with her records spread out before her, planning months ahead. She no longer thought only about survival. She thought about growth that lasted. about security that could not be taken away easily, about building something that would outlive luck. Elijah watched this transformation quietly. One evening, he told her that when he first met her, he had seen strength hidden behind silence. He said now that strength had found its voice. Clara smiled softly. She told him she had always been strong. She had just never been allowed to use it. Not every day was successful. There were arguments. There were moments when exhaustion made them short with each other, but even then there was respect. They learned to pause, to listen, to return to the problem instead of blaming each other. One difficult season tested everything they had built. Prices dropped. Feed became expensive. Several animals fell ill despite their care. Clara felt old fear return, heavy and sharp, but she did not freeze. She adjusted plans, reduced costs, delayed expansion. Elijah trusted her fully. They survived that season weaker but not broken, and when conditions improved, they recovered faster than others because their foundation was solid. Word spread further. People began calling Clara for advice. At first, she refused. She did not want attention, but Elijah pointed out that advice could become opportunity. She began charging small fees for planning help. Nothing unreasonable, just fair value for her time. That decision changed everything. Clara discovered she had a gift for seeing the full picture. She helped others avoid mistakes she had learned to fear. She guided them towards steady choices instead of risky ones. Her reputation grew beyond their land. Soon, income came not only from animals and trade but from knowledge. Clara kept learning. She read whenever she could. She asked questions. She listened more than she spoke. Years passed quietly. Success did not arrive with noise. It arrived with consistency. Their land expanded again. Their work became easier, not because it required less effort, but because it was better organized. Clara hired workers and treated them fairly. She paid on time. She expected effort, but she gave respect. People stayed. Elijah noticed something one evening as he watched Clara oversee work with calm confidence. The vow he had once made in his heart no longer felt like a promise about the future. It felt like a fact already unfolding. Clara was no longer building to prove anything. She was building because she knew how. And with every careful decision, every steady step forward, the woman once traded for almost nothing was shaping a life that no one could ever bargain away again. The town Clara once left behind had changed very little over the years. The same dusty roads, the same low buildings, the same way people gathered to talk about others instead of themselves. What had changed was the flow of money, goods, and work, and much of it now passed through Clara's hands, even if people did not always say her name out loud. She did not return to the town with noise or pride. When she finally came back, it was for business. A new storage house was needed. Trade routes had shifted. It made sense to invest there. Clara arrived in a simple carriage, dressed plainly, carrying papers instead of expectations. People noticed. At first, they did not recognize her. Then someone did. A whisper moved through the street. The rejected bride, the quiet woman, the one who had been sent away because she was worth too little. Now she was here, speaking with traders, reviewing land, discussing numbers without hesitation. Clara felt no anger as she walked those streets again. The place held memories, but they no longer controlled her. She was not there to remind anyone of the past. She was there to build. She met with town leaders and offered fair terms, work opportunities, storage solutions, stable prices. Some were cautious, some were eager. No one dismissed her. They had learned better. One afternoon, as she stepped out of a meeting, she saw a familiar face across the road. It was the man who had once rejected her. Time had not been kind to him. His posture was stiff, his clothes worn thin. He recognized her instantly. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he nodded, awkward and unsure. Clara nodded back. There was nothing more to say. She felt no victory in the moment, only distance. The past had lost its power. Back on her land, life continued with the same steady rhythm. Clara oversaw multiple operations now: land, trade, planning services. People came to her not just for work, but for guidance. She chose carefully who to help, not based on status, but on effort and honesty. Elijah remained beside her, not behind her, not above her. He handled what he always had: work that required strength, patience, and consistency. When people praised Clara, he did not feel smaller. When people praised him, Clara did not feel overlooked. Their partnership had grown deep roots. In the evenings, they often walked together, talking about the future, not in dreams but in plans. Clara spoke of expanding education for workers' children, of creating reserves for hard seasons, of ensuring no one under her care would ever be treated as disposable. Elijah listened and supported her. He reminded her sometimes to rest. She reminded him sometimes to think ahead. Balance had become natural between them. As years passed, Clara's name carried weight. Not because she demanded it, but because she earned it repeatedly. She never forgot what it felt like to be ignored. That memory shaped her leadership. When people asked how she became successful, she never told a dramatic story. She spoke of work, of patience, of choosing long-term stability over short-term gain, of being careful with trust but not closed to it. She did not speak often about rejection. She did not need to. Her life answered that question fully. One day, a young woman came to her seeking work, quiet, nervous, carrying everything she owned in a small bundle. Clara saw herself in her immediately, not in weakness but in potential. She offered the woman work, fair pay, and time to learn. Nothing more, nothing less. When the woman thanked her with tears in her eyes, Clara felt something settle gently inside her. The circle had turned. That night, Clara sat with Elijah under the open sky. The land stretched wide and calm before them. She thought about how far she had come, not in distance but in self-worth. She told Elijah something she had never said before. She said that being rejected had once felt like the end of her life, that she had believed she would always be something others could trade away. Elijah listened, then said quietly that the town had not rejected her. It had revealed itself, and she had walked forward. Clara smiled. She knew he was right. She was not the richest woman because of coins or land alone. She was rich because her life belonged to her, because no decision about her future was made without her voice, because her value was no longer measured by what she lacked, but by what she built. The promise Elijah had once made, to make her the richest woman in town, had been fulfilled in ways neither of them had imagined, not through sudden fortune but through steady belief. And as the wind moved softly across the fields they had shaped together, Clara understood one final truth.